This edition is brought to you by Monster, bought from my corner shop. So I'm going to need it to get through this one. So much has happened in like the last 2 weeks. So let me kind of switch gears for a second. So there's rumours of the UFC being purchased. That's one. Number two, Captain America is now a Nazi, if you've read the new Captain America. Number three, DC Rebirth has literally changed a whole bunch of shit. I don't even want to spoil that, but you need to pick it up if you're a reader. I mean, geez. I know long-term fans of this guy will be very happy. Let's just say that. The Flash finale, mind-blowing. Arrow finale, not so much. But the thing I want to talk about, and we will, guys, I'm going to talk about all of those things in separate videos. But what I really want to talk about right now is the WWE, according to Variety magazine, it came out yesterday, has announced that there will be a reckoning. There will be a brand split coming in July. Raw and Smackdown will be two separate brands. I'm not too sure how NXT is going to be affected. It didn't specify. But everybody's talking about this. And I have done enough research and I have enough knowledge on the brand split because I was going to do a throwback video on this. So it's kind of still fresh in my memory. And I want to talk about this brand split that they have announced. And I want to talk about the pros and cons, the highs and lows, the good, the bad, the ugly. So, geez, that monster. First of all, the brand split. Am I happy that there's going to be a brand split? Yes, to an extent. On paper and in theory, it's a good idea. Their roster is getting bigger and bigger. There's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of complaints online amongst fans that certain wrestlers, male or female, are lost in the shuffle. People are saying, well, where's Sasha Banks? Becky Lynch is lost in the shuffle. Paige is lost in the shuffle. Dean Ambrose is kind of a middleman. Cesaro is not being utilised properly. Damien Sandow, who's no longer in the company, didn't have a role. So many guys and girls that just didn't have roles on this big joint roster could really benefit from a brand split. I think it would work wonders for Dolph Ziggler in particular. I think it would be fantastic for Cesaro, for Becky Lynch, for all of these people, because if you have two separate brands, Raw, Smackdown, you have the parameters in place, the barriers in place, and you let Becky Lynch be the star on SmackDown, and you let Dolph Ziggler be the star on SmackDown, and you let Cesaro and Roman Reigns and Ambrose shine on Raw, and you let Cena do his thing on SmackDown, and you let Brock Lesnar do his thing on Raw. If you kind of keep them separate and let them be the kings of their own castles in this show, you could really do some amazing things. And again, in theory, it's a great idea. You could introduce so many new people as a result. You could build up some interpromotional dream matchups. You could really have something for WrestleMania, because I know a lot of people have said, and that's been a common, very recurring complaint, that, well, there's no big matches for WrestleMania anymore. There's no big matches. I don't really want to see Bray Wyatt versus Brock Lesnar. But now, with the parameters in place, and if they reinforce them and there's a sense of continuity with that, they could have, I mean, I'm just throwing two names off the top of my head, but you could have AJ Styles on SmackDown and you could have Seth Rollins on Raw, and these two could finally meet at WrestleMania, and that could be really, really big. You could do the same thing with John Cena and Roman Reigns. You could do the same thing with, let me think of another name, Cesaro and Brock Lesnar. You could do the same thing with Sasha Banks and Charlotte. You could have Charlotte deliberately politic to go to Raw to avoid Sasha. You could do that. This could be a great way to introduce Bayley. In theory, it's a very, very good idea, because it means so many guys and girls get some work and they all get a role, and that would be great. And it's choice for us, the fans. The thing that makes me kind of go not too sure about it is this. Remember the last brand split. Remember it. Fantastic idea in theory. They had a big enough roster. They had just bought WCW the year before. They had all this talent under contracts. They had all the developmental guys under contracts with OVW and HWA. They had enough talent to build two fantastic and strong rosters. And at first, it seemed to be going very, very well. If you remember, Raw was more the traditional WWF angle, skit heavy, entertainment based show. SmackDown was a bit more workhorse, work rate influenced. You had this famous SmackDown 7, if you remember. Brock Lesnar, you had Angle, Benoit, Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Edge, Rey Mysterio. Then outside of that core 7 guys, you had the special attraction in The Undertaker, you had the special attraction in Hulk Hogan, you had John Cena on the rise, you had that wacky storyline with Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson and Al Wilson. If any of you remember that, please YouTube that. It was a hoot. You had a lot of things going on and everybody had a role. You also then had the rise of Hassan Benjamin on that roster as well. It was great. And SmackDown was always great at rehabbing guys. But then the problem with that was this. God, speaking so fast. Speed Force is in my tongue, kids. If anyone remembers this, and this is a point I want to raise, I felt that the brand split started to fail because of certain things that were happening. Number one, I felt like after a while, Raw really was the priority show. And it will always be the priority show. And that hurt the brand split because Raw had to have all the resources and all the wrestlers and all the talent and all the marketing. And if you watch wrestling around that time frame, and in my research I did notice that Raw would poach guys from SmackDown all the time. I remember that SmackDown had a ready-made angle for Edge, who was injured for a year, and they could have brought him back. And they really needed the star power when Brock Lesnar left, which was another thing that hurt the brand split. Brock Lesnar leaving took something from that show. But they could have had Edge back, and then Raw had to take Edge, and then they had to take Shelton Benjamin, then they had to take Matt Hardy, they took Kennedy, they took MVP. Every time these guys are on the rise, they poached them back to Raw, and then SmackDown are kind of left with nothing. And that was definitely evident in 2004, where the star power was very depleted on SmackDown. You really had Guerrero and Rey Mysterio carrying that show on their backs. Booker T needed rehabilitating, RVD needed rehabilitating, JBL was just coming into his own, but Raw just took everyone, and they had everyone, and they could have given someone back like a Chris Jericho, and they wouldn't do it. So that was the beginning of the end of the brand split for me. And the other problem was you always had Raw trashing SmackDown, and I know for the storyline purposes of it being interpromotional and being like the Monday Night Wars, it would be great. But SmackDown never retaliated, and I always remember that. You'd have Hunter call the champion on SmackDown a paper champion, but there would never be a response back. Raw would constantly trash SmackDown, the B roster. There would never be a response, and because they kept calling it a B roster and telling the fans that, and the way that they would treat the roster, it really became a B roster. So that, to me, is where it went wrong, and they really did fail to create enough stars. And I'm not just talking about main event talents, talking about mid-level talents, female talents, tag team talents, just, a well-diverse roster. I think that they failed to do that. And I really hope that they have learnt from past mistakes, and coming into July when they do this, they look at reworking it. Another problem is structurally. A guy just comes in and there's no structure to go up and up, no ladder of progression, if you will. Dusty comment. So those are the things that kind of make me kind of scratch my chin a little bit and go, I'm not too sure about this brand split, because on the one hand it would be good for all these people to get all this work. On the other hand, if they go back to what they did before, Raw's the priority show, and do everything that I just touched on, this could not help. The other thing that makes me concerned is this. You've got Raw and SmackDown really as our joint one roster, and then you have NXT. That concerns me because of this reason. They're going to need to occupy spaces on Raw. They're going to need to occupy spaces on SmackDown. They're going to need to bring in faces and, this person and that person. What concerns me is they start going to NXT and they start taking Shinsuke Nakamura, who is he could be a star anywhere he wants to be, just for the record. You don't create stars like that. You don't get people like that very often. They could take a Nakamura, they could take an Austin Aries, they could take a Samoa Joe, they could take a Finn Balor. Yeah, that's great. You've seen them on the main roster every Monday and Thursday whenever SmackDown is on, I forget. That's great for us, but what happens if you put them on the roster, they get lost on the shuffle, and NXT suffers as a result? Then they take Gable and Jordan, and they take, who else? Let me think of somebody else there. They take Osaka and they take Bayley, and they just poach all this talent to the main roster. What's NXT left with? Which makes me think that WWE are going to have to spend a lot of money to make this work. You've got to spend money to make money, as I've been told a few times. That means then they're going to have to replenish the NXT roster. So that makes me concerned too, because if they keep taking everyone from NXT, all that goodwill, all that good faith, all that esteem, and all that credibility that NXT has established over the last 2 years could go to waste because they're like, well, we need to take someone from there and we need to take someone from here. And I guarantee you Raw will be very guilty of doing that. The other thing that really concerns me is Raw can barely just about keep a 3-hour show going. Now, if they do a brand split, a 3-hour show, I'm not too sure about that. I can barely watch a 3-hour show of Raw most days of the week. I have to watch it in parts throughout the week to kind of, do that, because I don't really like binge watching and I don't like the 3-hour wait unless I'm in a cinema. But 3 hours on a brand split, that's going to be very tough. Smackdown benefit because they've got 2 hours and they're going live. I think they can do that. But Raw in 3 hours, and since they've been 3 hours, the ratings have been very up and down. Creatively, it's not been the most satisfying thing to watch. So once again, it does make me very, very, very concerned about, I think they're going to have to split to 2 hours. The one argument you could make is with a separate Raw brand roster and 3 hours, it could, obviously the obvious thing to say is, mean an extra hour for a Tyson Kidd or a Natalia or somebody else to do something. That could be great, but they really need to be strategic about what they're going to do with that spare hour when there's a brand split. That's just me. Those are the things that I am thinking of right now on my Monster Charged, Speed Force Charged video. I'm going to stop right now. Videos are going to be more and more frequent. I'm trying to get my legs back again. Let me know what you think about this roster split. Kyle, if you're out there, comment down below. Anwar, if you're down there, comment down below. Anyone else, if you stumbled across me for the very first time, hit that subscribe button, hit a like button, follow me on Twitter @BuffBinStuff. I am out of here. Wow, I am all talked out. Guys, take care and peace.